Hello, hello. All right, let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Gubsheep from 0x Park, and today I'm going to be talking about the elixir of life and the language of truth. A bit of a brief intro. I am Gubsheep. I help work on applications of cryptography at 0x Park. I created the Dark Forest game back in 2019, and then since about 2 years ago have been working with my co-founder Justin Glibbert, among others, on 0x Park, which is a foundation that supports application-level innovation on Ethereum and with applied cryptography. All right, so before we jump in, one concept that I first want to seed is the idea of capabilities versus affordances. So when I use these two words here, I use capability to refer to a technology or the specific kind of power that a technology might give us. So this usually refers to a specific, technical thing such as a one-way function or a ZK snark. On the other hand, when we discuss affordances, we're usually talking more about the product or the people side of things. So we've got this amazing technology. It can do a lot of really awesome, maybe specific mathematical stuff. But how does that actually manifest at the end of the day to users, to society? How do we think about this technology and what it can actually do for us? So one example here might be a one-way function versus a digital signature. A one-way function is a capability. It's this weird hack that we've found in mathematics that we can leverage to do things like digital signatures. In and of itself, a one-way function without any other additional thought to it does not help us as a society, but once we have the affordance of a digital signature, then suddenly we have some very powerful unlocks. So one question that this talk is aimed at providing some answer to is, we've got these powerful new capabilities coming out of theoretical and applied cryptography. One of the hottest ones, of course, is zero-knowledge proofs, ZK snarks, and all sorts of other exotic things. And one question that we might ask is, what is the affordance of this technology? In a similar way that we don't call websites DNS apps, we call them things like landing pages or browser-based games or e-commerce storefronts. We want to figure out what is actually the thing that makes this technology useful, or the frame that makes this technology useful to people. So to do that, I'm going to go into a little bit of a world-building exercise. So imagine that you are a king or a queen of an ancient kingdom, in a land far, far away a long, long time ago. And for a couple of hundred years, your kingdom has had wax seal technology. So wax seal technology, for those of you who don't know, allows you to authenticate messages. In other words, I can write a letter, put it inside of an envelope, stamp it with a wax seal, and then anyone who receives that letter and sees that the seal is unbroken can verify that it did indeed come from me. And wax seal technology has been a pretty powerful and useful technology in this kingdom for the last couple of hundred years. For one thing, for example, it's enabled all sorts of new trade or financial activity, or a nascent banking and financial services sector. Because now, creditors, debtors, and lenders can be sure that their actions and transactions have been recorded properly, and that allows us to build financial abstractions at higher and higher levels. Additionally, another effect is, in your kingdom, previously there was a lot of trouble unifying the, let's say, outer territories with the, agendas of the royal court. And a lot of that might be due to communication issues, whether that's fidelity of the message or latency or things like that. And stuff like wax seals helps to align those outer territories, enabling you to have a more unified kingdom. But, as cool as wax seal technology is, it kind of isn't everything. And in fact, it's far short of what we might call revolutionary. In particular, if you are a court magician during the reign of this king or queen, your sights are probably focused on one of the magical wonders of the world, a set of hypothesized endgame states for certain branches of magic or invention. One magical wonder of the world might be the elixir of life, or the philosopher's stone, a hypothesized substance that grants immortality or arbitrarily long life to the drinker. Another one of these endgame magics might be the spell of animation or the spell of reanimation, which allows the caster to breathe life or even intelligence into an inanimate object such as a stone golem. And then finally, one more of these endgame magics is the language of truth. And this is a hypothetical language that you cannot tell a lie in. If a speaker speaks something or writes something in the language of truth, what they're saying or writing must be believed by them to be true in their heart of hearts, their soul of souls. So in the recent decades since the beginning of your reign, the first two of those technologies that I mentioned have become, it's become increasingly apparent that they are valuable. In particular, your kingdom is at war with the neighboring country. And you wonder about if there could be a breakthrough either in finding the elixir of life, then you could build invincible armies. If someone were to finally crack the secret behind the spell of animation, then you would be able to raise armies of stone golems. But, the third technology or magic here, the language of truth, is kind of a different flavor of thing. It's not a physical artifact, nor does it have any direct physical effects. And when we're thinking about a kingdom at war, it's a little bit confusing where exactly it might be helpful. So maybe you might be able to help root out spies in your army, but that's pretty far from being able to raise the undead or mint an army of invincible super soldiers. So over the last couple of decades, research into the language of truth has kind of fallen by the wayside in favor of these much more direct and tactile magics, where you see all of these court magicians spending their time trying to perfect increasingly better versions of the elixir of life or spells that can progressively animate golems to be more and more effective. One day, you hear a rumor from the neighboring kingdom that one of their court magicians has happened to crack the code behind the basic principles of a language of truth. Now, you also hear alongside this rumor that the language of truth is something that's, pretty hard to actually use. It's a very laborious process to even formulate a single sentence in the language of truth. In particular, you need all of the court's magicians to conduct like a ritual for 14 days and 14 nights in order to just craft, again, a single sentence. And what's more, the only things that you can speak about in the language of truth are things that have been bound to a true name, which itself is a pretty laborious and expensive ritual or process. So, for you, this is kind of just a curiosity. This is, pretty interesting, but again, it's kind of brushed off as not much more than a curiosity. Until later that evening, when a courier arrives at your court, breathless and clearly in need of delivering an urgent message. The courier hands you a scroll, which you unravel, and on the scroll you see a set of glyphs and symbols that you've never seen before and can't understand. But as you gaze closer into the scroll, a face and a booming voice starts to form in the back of your mind. It's the face of your mortal enemy, the ruler of the neighboring country. And in a rich, clear tone, the voice rings out, "I wish peace and friendship between our nations." And somehow you feel yourself strangely drawn to what has just been spoken. You have complete conviction that, in an ordinary case, such a declaration would prompt suspicion or even, accusations of deception. You'd be looking for the layers of lies within lies within lies. But what you realize as you're looking at these symbols is that you are reading for the first time an incantation of the language of truth. And instantly, the entire information hierarchy collapses into a single point. All of the layers of mistrust or confusion or context that you typically have to use to interpret such a statement, again, those are totally wiped clean, and you are convinced that the writer of this sealed message believes truly in their heart of hearts and their soul of souls that they wish for peace and friendship between our nations. And, awed by the power of even this very simple expression of the language of truth, you begin to wonder about what might the future hold for this magic. You imagine a world where someday this might not be something which requires court specialists to spend a fortnight casting even a single sentence, or a world where true names have actually been bound to most entities, concepts, and people that one would care to think about. A world where everyday people, perhaps a craftsman making a pledge to a guild, or a peasant showing a proof of creditworthiness or identification to an apothecary master, or even someone headed to market next week who scribbles down on a small stone tablet in the script of the true language that they're going to bring 5 apples. They promise to bring 5 apples to market. Something where the language of truth, again, goes through a similar progression as the other magics that you've seen at the time, becoming more easy and more accessible to use. So I go through this world-building exercise because I think that this actually maps almost one-to-one with what's going on with zero knowledge and a lot of forms of programmable cryptography, i.e. ZK snarks, Starks, fully homomorphic encryption, more exotic forms of encryption, multi-party computation, and more today. Programmable cryptography, in terms of the framing of affordances, enables a digital language of truth. Just like with the story that we just saw, we saw how wax seals enabled all sorts of commerce or different kinds of communication activity, but were incredibly limited at the same time. We also see how the previous generation of cryptographic tools, such as digital signatures or public key encryption, are powerful, but not quite all the way there. And today, we're starting to see the emergence of these general-purpose compute tools for cryptography, such as snarks, which allow you to prove claims over arbitrary programs, datasets, or structures. If we go to the example with the peasant and the apothecary, the thing that the peasant might have inscribed in the script of the true language on their stone tablet could look something in our world like this. This is a piece of data that is written in the digital language of truth. It may specify that someone who's addressed by that true name or cryptographic identifier under user address has 4 friends who attest to their creditworthiness. And as of a recent Ethereum block hash, they possess or they control private keys to accounts that hold a total of 20.37 ETH. And perhaps over the course of their long history of financial transactions in the kingdom, according to a fair and provably executed score function, they have a credit-worthy credit score. Now, the key thing about this is that the only thing that you have to do in order to interpret and verify this statement that is written in the script of the true language is you just have to look at this proof and perform a mathematical verification function that is accessible to anyone in the world on any computing device. No need to talk to any APIs, any trusted parties, look at the homepage of a given domain name. This is simply a self-contained, self-evident truth that anyone can generate. Now, of course, just like in our story, the digital language of truth has some similar problems. For one thing, the digital language of truth is only something that you can use to speak about cryptographically identified entities. This means things like key pairs or Merkle roots or hash commitments. So there's a similar problem in that binding a true names process, which we're now seeing as we see these registries of SSH keys, ECDSA keys, EDDSA keys, and more arise. And just like in our story, we also see today that speaking in the language of truth is actually something that is incredibly expensive. Specialists for the last decade have had to go through, these processes of summoning these very arcane glyphs, these, symbols into existence, running computations, running ceremonies and rituals, just to be able to say even a single sentence, I'm permissioned to withdraw from the secret vault. But like we saw with the ruler in the story, I think there's cause for optimism. We are seeing the performance of these systems improve by orders of magnitude per year, and what once might have taken a dozen specialists a fortnight in order to be able to cast might someday be possible for the ordinary layman who is going to the market next Tuesday and needs to scrawl a quick promise in the language of truth on a stone tablet. So the final thing that I want to ask is, what is the speculative fiction vision for crypto? I think that compared to a lot of other endgame technologies or other speculative technologies, crypto doesn't really have as compelling of an endgame in the popular narrative. We talk about coordination or Moloch, but there's not something as concrete as AGI summoning a god or relativistic travel enabling us to colonize the stars. And one thing that I think can benefit the space and really demonstrate why crypto is something that is as powerful, as cool, as much of a civilizational scale technology as something like the elixir of life or as the spell of reanimation is more narratives like this, more metaphors and analogies that help to uncover the real affordances of this technology. So this is the first in what may eventually be a 3-part series where I'll flesh out 2 other metaphors we've been playing with at 0x Park. Thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, hope everyone has a good ETC.